They demolished my family's 82-year-old bridge with a bulldozer early on a Wednesday morning. Stood there filming on their phones, laughing while the stones my grandfather laid in 1941 crumbled into the creek. What they didn't know, I owned the only other road into their gated neighborhood. Every single one of those 83 houses, and I was about to turn their morning commute into an expensive lesson about property rights. See, Darlene Pritchett, HOA president, real estate agent, professional bully, thought she could steamroll a quiet engineer because I wasn't the type to fight back. She was half right. I'm not the type to fight back. I'm the type to win. What would you do if neighbors destroyed something your grandfather built with his bare hands? Drop your revenge strategy in the comments. And before we dive in, where are you watching from? Drop your state or country below. Let's see how far this goes. My name is Garrett Sullivan, 56 years old, third-generation civil engineer, living on 125 acres in semi-rural Pennsylvania, about 35 minutes outside Pittsburgh. The kind of place where you wake up to creek water sliding over limestone instead of traffic noise, where your morning coffee comes with the smell of wet oak leaves and diesel from a Dodge pickup that's older than most marriages. The property's been in my family since 1939. My grandfather, Pop Sullivan, bought it during the Depression and built everything himself, including, in 1941, a stone and timber bridge over Blackwater Creek. It connected our land to Old Mill Road, the only route back then to 4 family farms. That bridge wasn't some weekend project. Pops pulled foundation stones from the creek bed, milled the timber himself, forged the iron brackets at the town blacksmith. It took him 9 months. I learned to fish under it as a kid. Helped my dad replace planks when I was 15. Every time I drove over it, gravel crunching under my tires, I heard Pop's voice, "Build something right, it outlasts you." I'm semi-retired now. Consulting gigs, some land lease income. Widowed 3 years ago. Daughter in Oregon. Quiet life. The bridge was the last thing I had from Pops. Then, about 20 months ago, a developer built Meadowbrook Estates on the old Kowalik farm. 83 homes, $1,800 and up, gated community with an HOA that thinks it runs the county. They needed a sewage easement across my land during construction. I negotiated, got paid $14,000, everything legal and recorded. Should have been the end of it. Then I met Darlene Pritchett. 61 years old, real estate agent, Tesla Model X, bleached bob, monogrammed everything. Elected HOA president 2 months after moving in and apparently decided her job was to remake the world in her image. In early April, she knocked on my door, no call, no warning, and handed me a certified letter. It demanded I remove my bridge in 30 days. Claimed it was an eyesore and a flood hazard per an HOA environmental study. I read it twice. "Ma'am, that bridge is entirely on my property. Your HOA has zero authority here." She smiled like a kindergarten teacher correcting a slow child. "Mr. Sullivan, we have documentation showing it's abandoned county infrastructure. We're asking you to comply with safety regulations. Your study is 4 pages from a landscaping company. There's not one engineer's signature on it." The smile tightened. "We'll follow up through proper channels." She left. I threw the letter away. Figured she'd give up. 1 week later, just after sunrise, I woke to a diesel engine roaring on my land. Ran outside in boxer shorts and boots, no time for a shirt, and saw a bulldozer ripping through my bridge. Stone cracking, timbers splashing into the creek, dust and smoke everywhere. I screamed at the operator. He waved me off. "Lady said it's county demo. Got a work order. That's my bridge." He didn't stop. And then I saw them, 3 SUVs parked on my access road. Darlene and 2 HOA board members standing there filming on their phones. One of them laughing. I called 911, hands shaking. The sheriff arrived nearly 45 minutes later. Bridge was rubble. The deputy took a report, said it was a civil matter, I'd have to sue. Darlene handed him a folder, calm as Sunday morning. Officer, we removed the hazard. We actually saved the county a lawsuit. I stood there in my underwear, covered in dust, and realized she didn't see me as a person, just an obstacle to bulldoze through. I walked back to my porch and sat. The smell of crushed limestone hung in the air. The creek ran muddy with debris. And I decided if Darlene wanted to play with property rights, I'd show her what a civil engineer knows about roads. Because I just remembered something very interesting about Old Mill Road. I hired a lawyer the next morning, Mitch Kowalski. Local guy. Handles land disputes and the occasional DUI. We went to high school together. He took one look at the photos of my demolished bridge and said, "Garrett, this is the clearest property destruction case I've seen in 20 years. We filed two things, an emergency injunction to prevent further damage and a lawsuit for $82,000 in damages. That number wasn't random, $138,000 for reconstruction, $128,000 for historical value, and $1,200 for emotional distress. The sheriff's report was frustratingly vague, civil matter, no clear criminal intent. But the county building inspector confirmed what mattered. The bridge was 100% on my property, fully legal, and Darlene's crew had zero permits for anything. Then Darlene's lawyers tried to get clever. They filed a counterclaim, arguing my bridge had been in public use for over 80 years. People drove over it to access Old Mill Road, so it should have become county property by now. Something called adverse possession. When Mitch read their filing, he actually laughed out loud. "Garrett, they clearly didn't do their homework." "Why not?" "Because adverse possession only works if the real owner abandoned the property or stopped maintaining it. You've got 30 years of receipts for bridge repairs in your filing cabinet." He was right. I'd kept everything. Every plank replacement, every bag of gravel, every can of wood sealant. My dad taught me that. He used to say, paper trail beats memory in court every single time. We submitted decades of maintenance records, photos of my private property signs, and tax documents showing the bridge was always listed as part of my assessed property value. The judge dismissed their counterclaim in 3 weeks flat. I won't lie, that felt good. But it was just round one. Darlene wasn't the type to back down. Not even close. Her HOA doubled down and hired a Pittsburgh law firm, the kind with marble lobbies and lawyers who bill $280 an hour just to read your email. They filed a motion claiming my lawsuit was frivolous and harassment. Demanded I pay $55,000 in their legal fees for wasting everyone's time. Then came the settlement offer. Hand-delivered by a paralegal in a suit that probably cost more than my truck. The terms: I drop my lawsuit, they drop theirs, and here's the kicker, they'd generously donate $5,500 to the local veterans fund in my grandfather's name. Mitch brought it to me at the diner, slid the paper across the table while I was halfway through a burger. "It's a PR play," he said quietly. "Makes them look reasonable in front of a judge. We tried to settle, Your Honor. We even offered charity in his grandfather's name." I stared at the number. $500. Mitch, my grandfather spent 9 months building that bridge with his hands. They tore it down in 40 minutes while filming it on their phones. And now they want to slap his name on a charity check and call it even. That's the play. I pushed the paper back. "Tell them no." "You sure? This could get expensive." "I'm sure." That's when Darlene went nuclear. 2 days later, a friend forwarded me screenshots from Meadowbrook's private Facebook group. The HOA had over 200 members, and apparently I was the hot topic. Darlene's post read, "Local landowner blocking community safety improvements. Refuses to cooperate with flood mitigation efforts that could protect your families. Some people care more about old junk than their neighbor's well-being." Another post mentioned me running outside in my underwear and hinted I might be going through something after my wife's death. The comments piled on. Sounds unstable. Why is the county allowing this? Our property values are dropping because of one guy. It spread to next door within hours. Someone started a thread, is Garrett Sullivan the problem with our neighborhood? I don't do social media. Never have. But watching strangers call me unstable and selfish, people who'd never met me, never heard my side, that stung more than I expected. Lyle called that night. Garrett, you see what they're posting about you? Yeah. You going to respond? I was on my porch watching the sunset over the creek. The air smelled like incoming rain, that sharp, clean ozone smell mixed with mud from the bank. No, what? Why not? Because responding means I'm playing her game. And I'm not interested in Facebook wars, Lyle. Then what are you interested in? Winning. There was a pause. You got a plan? Working on it. I hung up and pulled out my old Rolodex. Yeah, I still have one. Actual paper cards in a spinning file. I'm 56. Sue me. I started flipping through names. Engineers I'd worked with over 30 years. Surveyors who owed me favors. County clerks who'd been around long enough to remember when handshake deals still meant something. People who knew where the skeletons were buried, figuratively speaking. The next morning, Rosalie Chen called. She works in the county planning office. 15 years, knows every permit application, every zoning variance, every backroom deal that slides through when nobody's watching. Garrett, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I shouldn't be telling you this. Then don't, I said. I don't want you getting in trouble. Too late. Listen, Darlene's been pushing hard for expedited approvals on some expansion plans for Meadowbrook. New community center, tennis courts, the whole 9 yards. And she's been getting them pushed through fast. Suspiciously fast. How fast? 90-day reviews getting done in 3 weeks. And here's the thing, Commissioner Todd Giesham is the one signing off on everything. I wrote the name down. Should I know him? He's Darlene's boyfriend. They bought a vacation condo together in Florida last year. Public record. Both names on the deed. I stopped writing. You're telling me a county commissioner is fast-tracking permits for his girlfriend's HOA? I'm telling you that property records don't lie. What you do with that information is up to you. Rosalie, I owe you dinner. Just be careful. These people have friends in high places. I hung up and smiled for the first time in days. Because people with friends in high places always make the same mistake. They think they're untouchable. And when you think you're untouchable, you get sloppy. I spent the next 2 days at the county clerk's office pulling every file I could find. Property records, easement agreements, utility right-of-ways, old survey maps from the 1940s that smelled like dust and yellowed paper. I'm a civil engineer. I've spent 3 decades reading blueprints and legal descriptions that would put most people to sleep. But that day, I was hunting. And I found something big. But I didn't tell Mitch, didn't tell Lyle, didn't tell anyone. Because in poker, you don't show your cards until the pot's worth winning. Mitch called me Friday afternoon. Darlene's lawyers are pushing for a hearing next month. They want the judge to dismiss your case entirely and award them legal fees. Let them push. Garrett, you sound way too calm for someone about to get hit with a $55,000 judgment. I was standing at my window looking toward Meadowbrook in the distance. You could barely see it through the trees, but the streetlights were starting to flicker on as dusk settled in. Mitch, I need you to trust me on this. Trust you on what? Just keep filing motions. Keep them busy. I'm working on something. Working on what? I smiled. Insurance. What I didn't tell him, what I wasn't ready to tell anyone yet, was that I'd just discovered how to make Darlene Pritchett wish she'd never heard the name Sullivan. It all came down to one beautiful, legal, completely ironclad word: easement. I spent the next week buried in county records like a detective in a bad noir film. Except instead of whiskey and cigarettes, I had coffee and 3-ring binders that smelled like 1987. 3 full days at the clerk's office. Martha, the main clerk, stopped asking what I needed after day 2 and just started pulling document boxes before I walked in. "You looking for something specific, Garrett, or just hate sunlight now?" she asked on day 3. I told her a little of both, and she laughed, the kind of laugh that said she'd seen plenty of property feuds in her 30 years behind that counter and knew exactly how this would end. I pulled every document tied to Meadowbrook Estates: building permits, utility hookups, sewage approvals, environmental studies, zoning variances. I created a spreadsheet, color-coded and cross-referenced like I was preparing for trial. My daughter would have been proud. Or concerned for my mental health. That's when I found a crack in Darlene's armor. Meadowbrook's sewage system, a private treatment plant serving all 83 homes, had received conditional approval from the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection back in 2023. That word, conditional, is important. It meant temporary approval pending final upgrades and inspection within 18 months. I checked the deadline. It expired 15 months ago. Then I found 2 extension requests, both approved by the D Regional Office, both with recommendation letters attached. And guess who signed those letters? Commissioner Todd Giesham, Darlene's boyfriend. I leaned back and the chair made that loud government building creak that echoes through rooms built during the Carter administration. "Martha, I need copies of all this." She sighed. "How many trees we killing today?" I grinned. "All of them." That night, I called Brianna Hull, my former intern, now an environmental engineer in Philadelphia with more credentials than I can pronounce. "Garrett Sullivan," she answered over stadium noise. "This better be good. Phillies are losing and you're interrupting my suffering." I explained the expired permit situation, and she whistled low through her teeth. If they're operating on an expired conditional permit, that's a violation. DEP won't catch it unless someone complains. But once it's flagged, mandatory inspection within 60 days. If the system fails, they could get shut down entirely. Residents would have to truck out sewage at about $420 per household per month until repairs are done. Could take half a year. I asked if she could send me the complaint form. She paused. "Garrett, you file this, you're going nuclear." "You sure?" I told her I'd think about it. But I didn't need to think long. The next day, Darlene made my decision for me. I got 3 county code enforcement citations delivered by certified mail, all dated the same day. First citation: unlicensed junk vehicle for my dad's 1978 F-150 sitting behind my barn. It had been there 16 years. Never bothered anyone. Second, unsecured burn pile for an ash heap from clearing brush. Third, illegal signage because my "no trespassing" signs were apparently 2 inches too tall per township code. Each violation carried $150 per day fines if not fixed within 10 days. I called the code enforcement officer, a nervous kid named Tyler, who couldn't have been older than 24. "Tyler, I've lived here my whole life. Why am I suddenly getting citations for stuff that's been here for years?" He hesitated, then dropped his voice. "Mr. Sullivan, I was told to drive by your property daily and document violations. I'm just doing my job." I asked who gave the order. He wouldn't say, but he didn't have to. Only one person had that kind of pull with the township. I took photos of the citations and texted them to Lyle. He called back immediately, furious. "Garrett, nobody else in this township's gotten a citation in 6 months. This is targeted harassment." "I know," I said. "And I know what I'm going to do about it." There was a long silence on his end. Then he started laughing, that deep wheezing laugh he gets when something's either brilliant or completely insane. "You're really going to do it?" he asked. Yes. Then I want a front row seat when this blows up. That afternoon, I filled out Brianna's DEP complaint form, attached copies of the expired permit and Gisham's recommendation letters, and dropped it in the mail. Then I called Mitch and told him to file the code enforcement countercomplaint, harassment, selective enforcement, abuse of authority. While I had him on the phone, I asked him to pull one more document for me, the original plat map for Old Mill Road, dating back to 1953. He asked why. "I'll explain later," I said. I had a hunch about something that might change the entire game. He said he'd have it by the end of the week. I hung up and stood on my porch, watching the sun drop behind the tree line. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass from a neighbor's lawn and faint diesel exhaust from Highway 29 a mile away. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear Meadowbrook's landscaping crew running leaf blowers. That high-pitched whine that never quite stops in gated communities. I smiled. Because in about 60 days, DEP was going to show up at Darlene's door with clipboards and bad news. And she'd have no idea I was the one who invited them. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's paperwork filed in triplicate with a government agency that doesn't care who your boyfriend is. The code enforcement citations kept coming. Every 3 days like clockwork, Tyler, the nervous code officer, would show up with a new violation. My mailbox was 6 inches too far from the road. My gravel driveway had excessive dust concerns. My firewood stack was visible from the public right-of-way and constituted visual blight. Each citation carried the same threat, $150 per day if not remedied within 10 days. I fixed the first few just to avoid the hassle. But by the 5th citation, I stopped. Called Mitch instead. "This is harassment," he said flatly. "Document everything. We'll bury them in court." But court takes time, and Darlene knew it. She was bleeding me with 1,000 small cuts, hoping I'd give up before the real fight even started. Then I got an unexpected visitor. Sunday afternoon, a man in his early 50s knocked on my door, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Mr. Sullivan, my name's Ken Ashford. I live in Meadowbrook. I need to talk to you about Darlene Pritchett." I invited him in, made coffee, and waited. Kent sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around his mug like he needed the warmth. "I'm the HOA treasurer," he said quietly. "Elected position. And I've been documenting financial irregularities for 6 months." He pulled a folder from his bag and spread documents across the table. Bank statements, invoices, meeting minutes with dates that didn't match. Darlene's been paying herself consulting fees, $4,200 a month. It's not in the bylaws. Nobody voted on it. And this, he tapped an invoice dated the day after my bridge was demolished. "She used HOA funds to pay for your bridge demolition, $29,000. Listed it as, emergency infrastructure repair. No board vote. She falsified the meeting minutes afterward to make it look legitimate." I stared at the numbers. $29,000 of other people's money spent to destroy my family's bridge because she wanted it gone. "Kent, why are you showing me this?" He met my eyes. "Because what she did to you was wrong. And because she fined my wife $500 for planting the wrong color roses. I'm tired of living under a tyrant." I asked if he understood the risk. If Darlene found out he'd leaked financial records to me, she'd make his life hell. He smiled grimly. "She already does. At least this way I'm fighting back." I made copies of everything and shook his hand. "You're a good man, Kent." He shrugged. "I'm just an accountant who hates fraud." After he left, I sat with the documents and started piecing together the pattern. The expired septic permit. Todd Gisham signed recommendation letters. The falsified HOA minutes. The embezzlement. It wasn't just about my bridge anymore. Darlene and her boyfriend had built a little empire of corruption, and they'd gotten away with it because nobody had bothered to look closely until now. I picked up my phone and called Andrea Walsh, a local investigative journalist who'd written a few solid pieces about county corruption over the years. "Andrea, it's Garrett Sullivan. I've got a story for you." She sounded interested but cautious. "I read about that bridge dispute." I told her it was bigger. Much bigger. "How about county commissioners taking money from developers? HOA presidents embezzling and committing fraud? Environmental permits being covered up?" Long pause. "Mr. Sullivan, if you're serious, I need documentation." "I've got 400 pages of it," I said. "When can we meet?" she asked. We met the next day at a diner halfway to Pittsburgh. I brought the binder. She brought a recorder and a legal pad. For 2 hours, I walked her through everything. The bridge demolition. The code enforcement harassment. Gisham's conflict of interest. The expired septic permit. Kent's financial records showing embezzlement and fraud. She took notes, asked sharp questions, requested copies of key documents. When I finished, she sat back and exhaled slowly. "This is a legitimate scandal," she said. "But I need to verify some of this independently before I can publish. Give me a week." I told her to take whatever time she needed, but to be careful. Darlene had friends in the county government. Andrea smiled. "Mr. Sullivan, I've been doing this for 16 years. I know how to protect my sources." She published 5 days later. The headline ran online first: "County Commissioner linked to developer in land dispute, ethics questions raised." The article laid out Gisham's relationship with Darlene, the expedited permits, the campaign contribution from Meadowbrook's HOA PAC with Darlene listed as treasurer. It didn't mention the embezzlement yet. Andrea was holding that for a follow-up once she verified Kent's documents independently. But the damage was immediate. The article got picked up by a Pittsburgh TV station. By that evening, news vans were parked outside the county courthouse. Geesham released a statement denying wrongdoing, but the county ethics board announced an investigation within 48 hours. My phone started ringing. Other reporters wanting interviews. Township supervisors suddenly interested in my code enforcement complaints. Even a few Meadowbrook residents reaching out to apologize. I didn't answer most of the calls. Just sat on my porch watching the sun set over the creek and smiled. Because for the first time since that bulldozer showed up, Darlene wasn't controlling the story anymore. I was. And the best part, she had no idea how much more ammunition I still had. The road. The expired easement. The DEP complaint working its way through the bureaucracy. I was just getting started. Lyle texted me that night. "You magnificent bastard. She's spiraling." I texted back, "Good." The media firestorm around Geesham lasted 3 days before the real bombshell dropped. Andrea called me Tuesday morning, voice buzzing with energy. "Garrett, I verified Kent's documents. The embezzlement story runs tomorrow. But I wanted to give you a heads up. It's going to get ugly." I thanked her and hung up. Then I called Mitch. "It's time," I said. "Time to show them what I really own." Wednesday morning, while Andrea's embezzlement article was setting the internet on fire, Mitch filed 2 documents with the county. First, formal notice that I was withdrawing public access to Old Mill Road, effective in 30 days. Second, notification that the utility easement Meadowbrook had been using for sewage and power lines across my property had expired due to a clerical error in the original agreement, and I was not renewing it. Both documents were public record. Both were completely legal. And both landed like grenades in the middle of Darlene's already burning world. My phone rang within an hour. County Engineer's Office, sounding panicked. "Mr. Sullivan, we're reviewing your filing about Old Mill Road. Our records show this as a public road." I explained calmly that their records were wrong. The road had never been formally deeded to the county, and I had the 1953 survey documents to prove it. Long silence on the other end, then the sound of papers shuffling frantically. "Sir, if you close that road, Meadowbrook Estates loses its secondary emergency access route. Fire department response time would triple during rush hour." I told him that wasn't my problem. I was simply exercising my legal rights as a private property owner. He said he'd need to escalate this and hung up so fast I heard the phone rattle against the receiver. Then the calls started flooding in. Fire chief. Township supervisors. County planning director. Everyone's suddenly very concerned about public safety and emergency access and community welfare. I gave them all the same answer: the road is private. Always has been. And I'm within my rights to restrict access. If Meadowbrook wants continued use, they're welcome to negotiate an easement agreement at fair market rates. One supervisor actually sputtered, "But Mr. Sullivan, you can't just," I cut him off politely. "Actually, sir, I can. Check the deed records." By noon, the story had leaked to reporters. Andrea called again, barely containing her excitement. "Garrett, is it true you own the only alternate route into Meadowbrook?" I confirmed it. She laughed, that sharp, disbelieving laugh journalists get when a story gets better than they imagined. "This is incredible. They destroyed your bridge, and you own their backup road. That's almost poetic." I told her, it gets better. Their sewage and power easement also expired. They've been running utilities across my land illegally for months. She asked if I was really going to cut off their access. "I haven't decided yet," I said. "But fair compensation for use of my property seems reasonable." "What's fair compensation?" she asked. I leaned back in my chair and heard that satisfying creak of old wood. A rebuilt bridge would be a good start. The panic inside Meadowbrook was immediate and total. Emergency HOA meeting called for Thursday night. Kent texted me updates in real time. Residents shouting. Some demanding Darlene resign. Others talking about lawsuits. A few already calling real estate agents to list their homes before property values tanked. The meeting recording leaked to me by Friday morning, probably from 3 different sources. I sat in my truck in the driveway listening to it, windows down, afternoon sun warm on my arm, and the smell of cut hay drifting in from a neighbor's field. Darlene's voice came through shaky and defensive, trying to calm 83 panicking homeowners. "This is a legal technicality. Our lawyers are handling it. There's no real threat." But a resident cut her off, voice shaking with fury. "You told us everything was handled. Now we find out our president embezzled HOA funds and we might lose sewage service." Another voice, older and frightened, "My mother is 77. What happens if there's a medical emergency and ambulances can't get through because you pissed off the wrong neighbor?" Darlene had no good answers, just stammering excuses and empty promises. And me? I sat on my porch that Friday evening, watching the sun sink behind the trees, the sky going orange and purple like a bruise, the creek making that gentle rushing sound it always makes when the water's high. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Control. Not revenge yet, just the simple, satisfying knowledge that I held every card that mattered. Infrastructure is power. Roads. Utilities. Access. These aren't luxuries, they're necessities. And I own them all. My phone buzzed. Text from Lyle, Meadowbrook Facebook group is melting down. This is better than any poker game we've ever played. I smiled and typed back, game's not over yet. Now comes the fun part. Saturday morning, I brewed a pot of coffee, walked out to the porch, and watched a line of SUVs snake down Old Mill Road toward Meadowbrook. People were driving slower than usual, like they already felt the ground shifting beneath their tires. Around 10 a.m., I got the knock I'd been expecting. Darlene Pritchett herself, standing on my porch in an immaculate white jacket and oversized sunglasses like she was about to list a waterfront condo. Behind her stood 2 lawyers in tailored suits. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, tone sharp but controlled. "We need to talk." I didn't invite her inside. Just leaned against the porch rail, coffee mug in hand, and waited. She pulled off her sunglasses, trying for sincerity. "I think things have gotten out of hand. Nobody wants this kind of hostility between neighbors." I didn't respond. She continued. "We're willing to offer a settlement to avoid unnecessary escalation. If you rescind the easement revocation and allow continued access to the road and utilities, we'll drop all claims and issue a formal apology for the misunderstanding with the bridge." I let the word misunderstanding hang in the air like smoke. "An apology," I repeated. "For bulldozing my grandfather's bridge, filing false claims, harassing me through code enforcement, and publicly calling me unstable?" Her jaw tightened. One of her lawyers jumped in. "We're prepared to offer $28,000 in compensation as well. A very fair number, given the circumstances." I laughed, not politely. A real laugh, deep and sharp. "Lady, you spent $29,000 of your neighbor's money to tear that bridge down. You're offering me less than it cost to destroy it." The second lawyer tried to salvage it. "Mr. Sullivan, if this goes to trial, everyone loses. The HOA bleeds money, you spend years in litigation, and nobody wins. We're giving you a way out." I stepped closer, just enough for my voice to drop low and quiet. "I already have a way out. You're the ones who need one." Darlene crossed her arms, mask slipping a little. "What do you want, Garrett?" I looked her dead in the eye. "I want my bridge rebuilt exactly as it was, stone and timber. I want the HOA to cover every penny. I want a written admission of wrongdoing signed by your board. And I want you to resign as president permanently. Not take a break. Not step down temporarily. Gone. Or the road closes in 30 days. Her face hardened. "That's extortion." "No," I said. "That's leverage. And leverage is legal." She tried to stare me down. "I've spent decades negotiating construction contracts with men who'd bankrupt small towns just to get their golf course." Her glare didn't even register on the scale. I took a slow sip of coffee. "You've got 30 days, I said. After that, every car in Meadowbrook can find another way out, or hire helicopters." She spun on her heel and marched back to her SUV. One of her lawyers muttered something under his breath about unreasonable demands. I smiled and watched the taillights disappear down the road. Lyle called 10 minutes later. "She finally showed up, huh?" "Yup. How'd it go?" I gave her a choice. He chuckled. "I bet she didn't like it." "No," I said. "But she'll learn to." The next few weeks were chaos for Meadowbrook. Residents started organizing without Darlene. Someone started a petition to remove her as president. A handful of homeowners asked if they could negotiate their own access agreements with me separately from the HOA. I told them politely that any agreement had to go through the HOA as a collective. Divide and conquer works both ways, but I wasn't about to let them wiggle out of this as individuals. Meanwhile, the DEP inspector finally came. They showed up on a humid Tuesday morning with clipboards, reflective vests, and the weary look of bureaucrats who've seen everything. "Mr. Sullivan," the lead inspector said, "we're here to follow up on a complaint regarding Meadowbrook Estates wastewater treatment permit." I pointed them in the direction of the easement line. They spent 4 hours inspecting the system. By the end of the day, the lead inspector's face said everything: they'd found violations. Not catastrophic, but bad enough to trigger mandatory upgrades and daily fines until compliance. 2 days later, Meadowbrook got their official notice: $725 per day in fines until they brought the system up to code. Lyle called me when the news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. "She's losing it," he said, laughing. "Someone leaked the inspector's report to the HOA group chat. People are furious. Apparently, one guy threatened to sue Darlene personally if his property value drops. I leaned back on the porch rail, looking out at the creek where my grandfather's bridge used to be. The water was lower now, sunlight catching on smooth stones. "They're learning a lesson," I said. "What lesson?" Lyle asked. "That you don't burn down the one bridge you can't afford to lose." The HOA board fractured fast. Within a week of the DEP fines hitting, 3 members resigned. Kent kept me updated daily, not because I asked him to, but because, in his words, watching Darlene implode is better than cable. The petition to remove her as HOA president gained momentum. 32 homeowners signed in the first 3 days, 48 by the end of the week. They needed 58 to trigger a special election. Meanwhile, the HOA's legal bills were piling up. I heard through Kent that they'd already burned through $54,000 in legal fees fighting me, and their insurance company was refusing to cover most of it because their actions violated the policy. People started knocking on my door. Not Darlene, regular homeowners. The first was a young couple with a toddler. The husband wore a Meadowbrook maintenance polo. The wife looked exhausted. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, clutching her child's hand, "we're not here to fight. We don't want to lose our home." I told them I understood. I wasn't out to punish families, just the people who bulldozed my history and thought they were untouchable. I explained that I was still open to a deal. But it would be on my terms, the bridge rebuilt, the road access formalized under a paid easement, and Darlene gone. The husband nodded slowly. "Honestly, most of us want her gone anyway." They left looking a little less scared than when they arrived. A day later, an older gentleman knocked. Vietnam vet. Said he'd lived in Meadowbrook since the first house went up. "Son, I don't care who's right or wrong. All I know is if my wife needs an ambulance and can't get one, there'll be hell to pay." I assured him there wouldn't be, if his neighbors pushed the right person out of power. As more homeowners came by, something shifted. It wasn't me versus Meadowbrook anymore. It was me and Meadowbrook versus Darlene. And Darlene? She was unraveling. Kent started forwarding me HOA group chat messages, screenshots of her lashing out at board members, threatening to crush dissent, calling Kent a traitor. One message leaked to Andrea, the journalist. She published a short follow-up titled, "HOA President Under Fire as Residents Revolt Over Legal and Financial Scandal." This time, it wasn't about Geesham. It was about Darlene. Her name. Her face. Her crumbling empire. By the end of that week, the special election petition hit 60 signatures. The meeting was set for the following Thursday night at the Meadowbrook Community Center. Kent texted me the agenda: motion to remove Darlene Pritchett as president. Vote on interim leadership. Discussion of legal settlement with Garrett Sullivan. I didn't plan to go. This was their fight. But part of me wanted to see the look on her face when she realized she'd lost everything. Lyle convinced me. "Garrett," he said, "you've spent months being the villain in their Facebook fairy tale. You should be there when they realize who the real villain is." So I went. The community center was packed. 83 homes, and I swear 70 people were crammed inside that room. Folding chairs. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. A few folks avoided eye contact when I walked in. Others nodded at me quietly. Darlene sat at the front behind a cheap folding table, hair perfectly in place, makeup layered like armor. She banged the gavel, because of course she had a gavel, and called the meeting to order. "This is a hostile takeover," she snapped before anyone even spoke. "Lies, gossip, and outsiders trying to tear apart this community." Kent calmly stood and read the petition aloud. He wasn't dramatic about it. Just facts. One by one, people raised their hands when their names were read. 58 signatures required. 62 present. They voted. 49 for removal. 9 against. 4 abstained. Darlene's face didn't crumble. It calcified. Cold and sharp. "I'll fight this," she said. "Every one of you will regret this." Kent, bless him, didn't flinch. "You're suspended as president effective immediately." A few people actually clapped. Others just sat there in stunned silence. Darlene grabbed her purse, stood, and stormed out without another word. The room exhaled. Kent turned to the crowd. Item 2, interim leadership. And then, Item 3, settlement with Mr. Sullivan. Every eye in the room shifted toward me. I stood, walked to the front, and placed a single folder on the table. "This is what I want," I said evenly. "Rebuild the bridge. Pay for it in full. Sign a written agreement acknowledging the destruction was unlawful. Formalize a paid easement for road and utility access. And no more harassment. Ever. No yelling. No dramatics. Just the facts." A woman in the back asked, "How much are we talking?" I gave them the number, $164,000 total, bridge reconstruction, easement fee, and legal costs. There was some murmuring. A couple of scowls. But more nodding than I expected. Kent cleared his throat. Considering how much Darlene already cost this HOA, that might actually be a bargain. Someone in the crowd laughed, bitter and tired. They voted to authorize negotiations. When I walked out into the cool night air, Lyle was waiting by my truck with that fox-like grin he gets when a poker hand goes exactly the way he planned. "You did it," he said. "Not yet," I replied. "But she's done." Negotiations moved faster than I expected. With Darlene gone, the new interim board wasn't interested in fighting a war they couldn't win. They hired their own lawyer, not the big city firm Darlene had picked, but a local guy who looked like he still split firewood in his backyard on weekends. The first meeting happened at my kitchen table. Kent was there, 2 board members I hadn't met before, their lawyer, and Mitch. I brewed coffee for everyone. Nobody came in swinging. Their lawyer opened with, "We want to make this right." I leaned back in my chair. "Then we're already off to a better start than last time." We went through every term line by line. Bridge reconstruction, full restoration with stone and timber, matching the original as closely as modern codes allowed. They'd pay 100% of the cost, around $112,000 based on the contractor's estimate. Easement agreement, 30-year term with renewal options, covering road and utility access. Annual fee locked in at $6,800, adjusted for inflation. Legal and damages, $46,000 to cover my attorney fees and related costs. Written admission, a signed statement from the HOA board acknowledging that the bridge demolition was unlawful and carried out without proper authorization or permits. The only thing they asked for in return was that I agree not to pursue additional damages or block emergency access during reconstruction. I told them that was fair. When it was done, everyone shook hands. No one was thrilled. But they were relieved. So was I. The next week, heavy equipment rolled back onto my land, only this time with my permission. I stood at the edge of the creek watching the crew work. They set new foundation stones first, then started assembling the timber frame, carefully notching each beam to fit like the old one. The foreman, a quiet man with silver hair and calloused hands, nodded at me. "Good bones," he said. "We'll make it right." It took nearly 6 weeks. Every morning I came out with coffee, leaned on the fence, and watched. Lyle started calling it bridge therapy. Some of the Meadowbrook residents came by too, the young couple with the toddler, the old veteran, a few others. They thanked me, quietly, a little sheepishly. I wasn't looking for apologies, but I appreciated the gesture. Kent stopped by often. We'd sit on the porch, talk about nothing and everything. He was still treasurer, but now half the neighborhood treated him like the guy who saved them from Darlene's mess. One morning, as the final timber went up, the foreman wiped his hands on his jeans and said, "She's done." The new bridge wasn't an exact copy. It was stronger, reinforced underneath, but the stonework matched what my grandfather laid in 1941. I walked across it slowly, gravel crunching under my boots. The creek below glimmered in the sunlight, soft and steady. For the first time since that bulldozer roared through, the knot in my chest loosened. The HOA wired the first easement payment 2 days later. The check cleared. Everything was official. A week after that, the DEP posted a compliance notice confirming Meadowbrook had fixed their septic system and paid the fines. Their emergency access was secured, and life in that gated neighborhood started to settle down. Andrea published one last story, not a bombshell, just a quiet follow-up about a resolved dispute and a rebuilt bridge. Geesham was still under ethics investigation, and Darlene had lawyered up, but that wasn't my problem anymore. One evening, I sat on the bridge alone, legs dangling over the edge like I used to when I was a kid. The stones beneath me were new, but they felt familiar. Pop Sullivan used to say, "Build something right, it'll outlast the people who try to tear it down." He was right.